With Madden 23 bringing some actual new features and not stuff that was rehashed from the older Maddens and called a new feature, so stuff like height and weight actually have an impact now. So I wanted to see how much height actually matters, so I decided to set up a team of the tallest and shortest players of each position and have them face off in a best of 3 series to see if height actually does matter. After spending 4 hours looking at the heights of every player, I made the roster of the tallest and shortest players, and all that was left was to get them on the correct team. I put the tallest players on the Giants, and I wanted to put the shortest players on a team in the same division so that they would play each other twice, and if they tied I could easily set up a tiebreaker, so I decided to put the short team on the Cowboys, and the only reason is because they were the first division matchup that the Giants had. And now let's take a look at the rosters, and I'm only going to talk about the starters, but you can pause the video and look at the backups if you want. Now let's go look at the roster for the tallest team. The quarterback is Jake Dolgala, who is 6'7", and Jake Dolgala is a 54 overall, which might hurt the tall team, but we'll have to wait and see. The running backs are Derrick Henry and Latavius Murray, who are both 6'3", and almost every fullback was 6'3", so I just went with the first two that I saw, and they were Patrick Ricard and Andrew Beck. For the wide receivers, I chose 6 of them just in case one of them got injured because I do have injuries on for this, and the number 1 wide receiver is Colin Johnson, who is 6'6", and the other 5 receivers were all 6'5", and they are Mike Evans, Alan Lazard, Auden Tate, Equanimous St. Brown, and Cam Sims. The tight end is Donald Parham Jr., who is 6'8". The left tackle, Dan Skipper, is tied for the tallest player on the team at 6'9". At left guard, we have Andreas Pete, who is 6'7", center Mitch Morris, who is 6'6", right guard Marcus McKeithen, who is 6'7", right tackle Caleb Jones, who is tied with Dan Skipper for the tallest player at 6'9", left end Greg Rousseau at 6'7", right end Calais Campbell at 6'8", at defensive tackle there's DeForest Buckner, who is 6'7", left outside linebacker Carl Nassib at 6'7", middle linebacker Tremaine Edmonds at 6'5", right outside linebacker Charles Snowden, who is 6'7", and corners, just like with the wide receivers, I went with 6 of them just in case of injury. 2 out of the 6 corners are 6'4". They are Tariq Woolen and Nashawn Wright, and the other 4 corners are Sauce Gardner, Benjamin St. Juste, Joejuan Williams, and Kevin King are all 6'3". Free safety Ifatu Melifonwu, I probably just butchered that. He is 6'4". Isaiah Simmons at strong safety is 6'4". Daniel Carlson playing kicker, 6'5", and finally J.K. Scott, the punter, at 6'6". And now let's take a look at the shortest team. So the recap that I just did for the Giants and the one that I'm about to do for the Cowboys was recorded after everything because while I was editing the video, I realized that I needed to go back and do this just so I can show you all of the starters. Like I said, I had to load up the franchise and record this, so this is like the last thing that was recorded. So the shortest team will be missing a couple players and some of their overalls will be different, but that literally doesn't matter because the backups never played and they will be there in the games. Quarterback, we have Kyler Murray, who is 5'10". Running backs are J.J. Taylor, who is 5'5", and Boston Scott, who is 5'6". Fullback, C.J. Ham, who is 5'11". Wide receivers, we have Deontay Hardy, who is 5'6", Rondell Moore, Greg Dortch, Jakeem Grant at 5'7", and Isaiah McKenzie and Tavon Austin at 5'8". Tight end is Connor Hayward at 5'11". Left tackle Charles Leno Jr. at 6'3". Aaron Brown, left guard, 6'1". Center Nick Harris at 6'1". Shaq Mason, right guard, 6'1". Right tackle Isaiah Wynn, who is 6'1". Left end James Houston IV at 6 foot tall. Defensive tackle Michael Pierce at 6 foot. Right end Poona Ford at 5'11". Left outside linebacker Quincy Williams at 5'11". Middle linebacker Darian Butler, who's 5'10". Right outside linebacker Malcolm Rodriguez, who is 5'11". For cornerbacks, Marcus Jones, Miles Bryant, Duke Shelley, Amik Robertson, Nickel Roby-Coleman, and Jaharvis Davis are all 5'8". Free safety Lamarcus Joyner is 5'8". Strong safety Grayland Arnold is 5'9". Kicker Caleb Shundak is 5'7", and the punter Ryan Stonehouse, who is 5'10". And since Madden only lets you take control of one team, I took control of the Giants and tried to set the Cowboys lineup the best that I could, but the AI would always start the highest overall players, so in some games the backups who are higher overalls will play, and that is why you might not see some of the players that I just sat here for 5 minutes and named off. Now that you have been introduced to both of our teams, let's head straight into Game 1. The game starts out as Jake Dolgala channels his inner Tom Brady and throws a 3-yard check down for his first 2 completions. And Derrick Henry gets a nice 13-yard rush, but the drive does not amount to anything as Derrick Henry gets stuffed on a 4th and 1. The Cowboys drive gets stunted by back-to-back sacks by DeForest Buckner and Greg Rousseau, and the Giants get the ball back at the 45. Then the 54 overall quarterback Jake Dolgala goes deep and connects with Mike Evans on a 55-yard touchdown where Jake Dolgala was showing off his 91 throw power. The Cowboys now down 7. Kyler Murray tries to get the offense going with a 25-yard rush. Unfortunately, he could not get out of bounds, got hit, and fumbles, giving the ball right back to the Giants. James Houston takes advantage of going up against a 59 overall and is able to shed off Dan Skipper and sack Jake Dolgala, which forces the Giants to punt. Jake Dolgala is on fire as he starts off the second quarter with a deep pass to Colin Johnson to set them up at the 34, but that does not matter since the Cowboys were able to play some defense and the Giants had to settle for a field goal, making it a 10-point game. After back-to-back punts by both teams at the start of the fourth quarter, the Cowboys are going for it on 4th and 9, and if the Cowboys are unable to convert, it would give the Giants the ball at the 27-yard line and pretty much guarantee that they would score and possibly put the game out of reach. But Kyler Murray was not going to let that happen as Isaiah McKenzie beats Tariq Woolen and gets the Cowboys down to the 18-yard line. And I am pretty sure that on that one play alone, Kyler Murray got more passing yards than he did all of the first 3 quarters. A few plays later, the Cowboys score a touchdown with Tariq Cohen. Yeah, remember when I said that I did not have control over the Cowboys roster? And since Madden only lets you control one team, the Cowboys signed him and played him over J.J. Taylor. But it's not that big of a deal since Tariq Cohen is 5'6", and that's only 1 inch taller than J.J. Taylor, and he's the same height as Boston Scott. After a clutch stop on 3rd down, the Cowboys use their final timeout, but J.K. Scott gets a perfect punt, and the Giants are able to down the ball at the 6-yard line. The Cowboys' first play goes for 20 yards, but their right tackle Isaiah Wynn gets hurt, and that uses up one of their timeouts. The next play, Kyler Murray gets a 6-yard rush, and the Cowboys call hurry up, and still in hurry up, Kyler makes a costly mistake as he runs right into Aiden Hutchinson, and instead of using a timeout, the Cowboys are still in hurry up, as they wait for the last possible second to use their timeout. With only 30 seconds left, Kyler completes a pass to Tariq Cohen, who is able to get out of bounds and stop the clock with 28 seconds left to go. Kyler then makes another massive mistake as he runs right into his own O-lineman, gets himself stuck, and then sacked by Aiden Hutchinson, which forces the Cowboys to use their final timeout as they only have 11 seconds left. The Cowboys are going to attempt the field goal, but the Giants ice them, so now Rodrigo Blankenship, who they randomly signed, has to make a 56-yard game-winning field goal while iced. And it was one of the worst field goals that I have ever seen, and it did not even make it out of the back of the end zone. The Giants killed the rest of the clock and won the game 10-7 and take the 1-0 lead in the series. Jake Dolgala had a pretty solid game, going 16 for 23 for 190 yards and 1 touchdown. Kyler Murray also played solid, going 11 for 19, 162 yards. And he did pretty well on the ground with 3 carries for 34 yards, but he did have that pretty costly fumble. Derrick Henry did not do that well as he had 11 carries for 29 yards, and Tariq Cohen had the only touchdown of the day for the Cowboys. The leading receivers were Isaiah McKenzie and Colin Johnson, and the Giants had 6 sacks as Aiden Hutchinson and Greg Rousseau had 2 sacks each. James Houston IV was the Cowboys' only sack of the day. Tremaine Edmonds got credit for forcing the fumble on Kyler Murray, and Charles Snowden recovered the fumble. With the first game finished, let's jump right into the second one and see if the tallest team will be able to close it out and win 2-0, or will the shortest team be able to force it to the third and final game. For the second game, the Giants will be without their leading receiver from the first game, Colin Johnson, who is out for the next 4 weeks due to the injury. On the first drive of the game, the Cowboys decide to play aggressive and go for a 4th and 5 instead of trying to pin the Giants deep inside their own 5-yard line, and Kyler almost throws a pick and the Giants get the ball. On the Giants' first drive, Jake Dolgala completes 2 nice passes, one to Mike Evans, who gets to the 43, and the next one to Donald Parham, who gets all the way down to the 13, and perfectly sets up the Giants to score the first points of the game. Unfortunately for the Giants, Dolgala got sacked and threw a bad pass that forced the Giants to settle for a field goal, taking the 3-0 lead. But Kyler and the Cowboys finally get the offense going as they march down the field, and Kyler completes a 23-yard throw-on-the-run pass to Isaiah McKenzie, and the Cowboys take the 7-3 lead. The Giants end up punting and forget how to play defense as Kyler takes advantage and marches the Cowboys down the field as they settle for another field goal. Jake Dolgala proves why he is the GOAT as he leads the Giants downfield and gets into field goal range, and they go into half down 10-6. Daniel Carlson is making his case for the MVP of this game, as he barely makes a 62-yard field goal that cuts the Cowboys' lead down to 1. With 5 minutes left in the game, Jake Dolgala throws the first interception of this 3-game series, and that could have just cost the Giants the game, and it did, as Kyler walks into the end zone for a 10-yard rushing touchdown, as the Giants could not get any momentum after throwing the pick and giving up the touchdown, as they were forced to punt and ran out of time on their final 2 drives, and the Cowboys end up winning 17-9, and force it to the final game to decide the winner. Jake Dolgala definitely played better in the first game, as he went 18 for 33, 199 yards, and an interception. And Kyler Murray played better in the second game, as he went 14 of 23 for 163 yards with a passing touchdown, and on the ground he added 5 carries for 42 yards and a touchdown. Derrick Henry somehow performed even worse, having 7 carries for only 9 yards. The leading receiver for the Giants was Mike Evans, who had 5 receptions for 85 yards, and for the Cowboys it was Rondale Moore, who had 4 receptions for 44 yards, and Isaiah McKenzie had the only receiving touchdown. In the first game, the Giants had 6 sacks, and in this game they had 0. The Cowboys had 1 sack, and it was split between James Houston and Carlos Dunlap, and Janoris Jenkins was the one who got the interception. And we are just going to ignore the fact that both Carlos Dunlap and Janoris Jenkins were not supposed to be playing. Let's just skip over that and look at the season stats and see how the players and teams both performed over the season. The Giants were looking like the Panthers, going 4-13 and being on a 10-game losing streak. The Cowboys were not much better, as they went 5-12, losing the last 5 games. Jake Dolgala played like a 54 overall, throwing for 3,696 yards, 21 touchdowns, and throwing 27 interceptions, and also getting sacked 49 times. Derrick Henry had an okay but pretty underwhelming season, only having 952 rushing yards and 11 touchdowns. Receiving-wise, Mike Evans was the leader in both yards and touchdowns, with 767 yards and 7 touchdowns. Dan Skipper will get the award for being the biggest liability, as he led up 25 sacks by himself. DeForest Buckner led the team in sacks with 9.5, and Tariq Woolen led the team in interceptions with 3. Kyler Murray played very well, as he threw for 4,529 yards, 31 touchdowns, and 14 interceptions. I think I found out the reason why the Cowboys only got 5 wins. It was because their rushing attack was awful, as their leading rusher Boston Scott only had 497 yards, and J.J. Taylor had the most rushing touchdowns at 7. Isaiah McKenzie led the team in both yards and touchdowns, just like Mike Evans. He had 1,152 yards and 12 touchdowns. James Houston IV led the Cowboys with 5 sacks, and Antoine Winfield Jr. led the team in interceptions with 5. Taking a look at the team stats, the Giants had the worst offense with only 5,225 total yards of offense, and the 3rd worst passing offense. The Cowboys had the least amount of rushing yards in the league at only 1,154, and the Giants were the lowest scoring team in the league, averaging just 16.8 points per game and gaining only 247 first downs. The Cowboys' defense allowed the 3rd most yardage at 6,634 yards, and the Cowboys allowed the 3rd most passing yards, while the Giants allowed the least amount of passing yards. The Cowboys allowed the 3rd most points and were bottom 3 in sacks, and I went and looked at the conversion rate, and the Giants and the Cowboys only converted 40 and 41% of their 3rd downs. I'm surprised at how bad the Giants were on 4th down, as they went 9 of 29 and had a 31% success rate on 4th down. Now that I have bored you by reading off stats that you do not care about for 5 minutes, it's finally time to get in the 3rd and final game to determine the winner and to see if height actually matters. I could not think of a better place for a tiebreaker game than the Super Bowl, so I remade the rosters in a separate franchise and kept the tallest players on the Giants and moved the shortest players to the Jets so that they could play in the Super Bowl. It all comes down to this: the winner of this game will be crowned Super Bowl champions and winners of the best of 3 to determine if height actually matters. After forcing the Jets to punt, the Giants' first play of offense was Jake Dolgala throwing the ball right into the hands of Antoine Winfield Jr., and that sets the Jets up perfectly at the Giants' 33-yard line. On 3rd and 2, Kyler Murray takes off and gets the ball way downfield to the Giants' 7-yard line. After another Kyler Murray rush gets them down to the 2, they hand the ball off to CJ Ham as he bullies his way into the end zone and scores the first touchdown of the Super Bowl and puts the Jets up 7-0. After the Giants' first 2 drives, I didn't see Derrick Henry at all, so I thought maybe he was just injured, but after looking at the injury report, he wasn't there, so I went and checked the depth chart, and he was listed as the number 1 running back, but spoiler alert, he does not play in the game at all for some reason, and the only time I saw him was on the field right before halftime, and that was it. I'm not sure why they didn't use him or Latavius Murray either. Latavius Murray had a few plays and like 1 run, but for some reason the Giants went with the fullbacks at running back and decided to make Andrew Beck their starting running back. Kyler Murray ends the first quarter with a huge rush and a quick pass to set them up at the Giants' 9-yard line, and a few plays later, Boston Scott gets the easy touchdown, and that puts the Jets up 14-0. The Jets have all the momentum and are looking to go down and score and make it a 3-possession game, but Greg Rousseau lays a massive hit on Boston Scott, and Aiden Hutchinson is able to recover the fumble, and the Giants have the ball on the Jets' side of the field for the first time this game. On 3rd and 13, Jake Dolgala tries to hit Donald Parham for the touchdown, but he just misses and the ball is intercepted by Marcus Jones. There is a penalty, but it ends up being holding on Dan Skipper, and the Giants wasted a perfect opportunity to score off the turnover, and the Jets get the ball back, and they can send to half and keep the lead 14-0. But the Giants came out of the half swinging, as Jake Dolgala remembered how to play football and hits Chris Sims for a massive reception, then hits Equanimous St. Brown, who gets the ball down to the 1, and Andrew Beck fights his way into the end zone, as the Giants finally get on the board and make it a 14-7 game. The Jets are starting to fall apart as they have their second fumble of the game as Jaron Kearse hit sticks Isaiah McKenzie, and Nahshon Wright recovers it and returns the ball to the Jets' 20. Andrew Beck will not let Jake Dolgala ruin another opportunity to score and takes matters into his own hands with a tough run that gets them down to the 1, and on 4th and goal he walks in untouched for his second touchdown of the game and tying the game at 14. The Jets have now lost all momentum after the 2 turnovers and needing to get something going on offense, but the Jets are collapsing faster than the 15-1 Panthers as Kyler throws a pick right to Kevin King, and the Giants get another turnover that sets them up with great field position. Luckily for the Jets, the Giants only managed to get 4 yards on the drive and had to settle for the field goal. That is good, and for the first time in this game, the Giants have taken the lead, and the Jets have let the Giants score 17 unanswered points. Faced with a 4th and 1 on their own 33-yard line and down 3, the Jets decide to punt the ball and trust their defense can stop Andrew Beck. And after letting up a first down, the Jets were able to stuff Andrew Beck on 3rd and 3 and force the Giants to punt, and J.K. Scott gets a very good punt that pins the Jets at their own 18. Now with no timeouts, the Jets had to drive down the field a good 50 to 60 yards to try and get into field goal range with only a minute and 39 left on the clock. Kyler Murray was ready for this as he completes a quick pass to Deontay Hardy over the middle of the field and then another quick pass to Isaiah McKenzie, who gets to the 43. Unfortunately for the Jets, the next 2 passes are for only 6 yards total and have done nothing but waste the clock. And instead of calling hurry up one more time to spike the ball or at least attempt the game-tying field goal, the AI does the surprising move, throwing a pass over the middle and watches as the time winds down and the Jets lose the game 17-14. Looking at the final stats, Jake Dolgala definitely did not deserve to win the Super Bowl as he had a stat line of 12 for 22, 117 yards, and 2 interceptions. And the same with Kyler as he played slightly better, went 16 for 21, 148 yards with 1 interception. The Super Bowl hero that nobody expected, Andrew Beck, having 15 carries for 47 yards and 2 touchdowns. Boston Scott had an alright game with 9 carries for 36 yards and a touchdown. He did have that 1 fumble, but it was the one where Jake Dolgala ended up throwing a pick, so it didn't matter too much. The leading receiver for the Jets was Deontay Hardy with 8 receptions for 87 yards, and the Giants' leading receiver was Cam Sims with 3 receptions for 46 yards. One of the most surprising things about this game is that there were no sacks, just a few TFLs. Marcus Jones and Antoine Winfield Jr. had interceptions for the Jets, and Kevin King had the interception for the Giants. Greg Rousseau and Jaron Kearse were the ones who forced the fumbles, and Nahshon Wright and Aiden Hutchinson were the ones who recovered the fumbles. Taking a look at who was Super Bowl MVP, it was Kevin King for getting that 1 interception that set the Giants up for the touchdown. So now we know that height does matter in Madden only if you have 2 AIs play each other in a best-of-3 series. Oh, after the game I went to look at the season stats and I saw that a 46-year-old, 88 overall Tom Brady threw for 5,613 yards. Why will he not go away?